Let me go to Minister Paulo Guedes, and you have a lot of challenges in Brazil, which is one of the most powerful economies, país más grande do mundo. We need Brazil to grow, and I would like to ask you, Brazil has not been growing enough and has this tremendous challenge of reforms and the pensions particularly. So can you tell us a little bit, Minister, what are the things that this government of President Bolsonaro is trying to gear to get more investment, to open up, I hope, to seal the deal, Mercosur, Europe? There's so many things on your plate.
Certainly.
Different from Argentina, I must say, but also very challenging. Minister, please.
Well, Brazil was once, by some decades, the fastest growing economy in the world. Brazil used to grow faster than China, than Korea, than Japan. Japan was number 2 for 2, 3, 4 decades. Like Argentina was once the 5th largest, highest per capita income in the world. Somehow we lost our way. Mm-hmm. And in the Brazilian case, tracking just the last 40 years, you can see public expenditures as a ratio of GDP coming from 18% under the last 2 military governments, when 18% at the end of the military government was already 22, 23. Then the civilian governments, one after the other, 30%, 36, 40, 45%. So you saw not only a lot of misfunctionings, because when you're spending too much, for instance, in the Geisel government, which was the one before the last of the military government, he was recycling petrodollars and spending a lot through state companies. So our history of a sequence of exchange rate crises began there. Then the last military government with Figueiredo, it was the threat of hyperinflation. Inflation came from 30%, 40%, 100% to 200%. And then 2-3 years stable, if you could imagine something like that, stable around 200% inflation. All the economy indexed, wages, rents, everything indexed. Then the civilian government, first elections, and then we went to hyperinflation, 5,000%. And then we began fighting symptoms of inflation instead of fighting the underlying phenomena. We began attacking symptoms. We have frozen prices, then we froze financial assets, and eventually we learned the importance of the central bank, of floating rates, but still, because public expenditures was uncontrollable, we just switched inflationary finance for a snowball indebtedness. Then internal debt came from 20, 30% of GDP to almost 80% of GDP, which is where we are now. And then at the end of these 40 years, what we saw with this uncontrollable expansion of public spending, the corruption of a democratic system, and economic stagnation. So it is not something that happened suddenly to Brazil. Brazil was growing 7.3, 7.4 average for 2, 3, 4 decades. Then we decelerated to 5% at the end of military government. Then we began 2, 2.5 for 15, 20 years. And then we collapsed to 0 and eventually minus 3%, minus 3%. So it is a long story. I compared it to harpooned a whale, big whale, a giant dimension. It was a continent. It's a continental dimension economy with natural resources, with everything. And then we harpoon it with very high interest rates, with hyperinflation, with a lot of bureaucracy, high taxes. Eventually, you kill the whale. So we collapsed. And I'm using, just to simplify the situation, even to my president, to the popular opinion in Brazil, first year, we will remove 1 or 2 harpoons. It will grow 1%. Second year, we keep removing harpoons. It will move better, 2%. Third year, 3%. Last year, 4%. Well, first year was 1.2. And this year, looks like it's 2.5. So even higher than what I thought at the beginning. So we're beginning to remove the harpoons, the economy is beginning to move, and we believe we will be contributing in this next 2, 3, 4 years, certainly to the growth of the region. We began attacking the number one expenditures, Social Security. It was exponential, the increase. And even worse, a factory of privileges, because they were unequal. If you are a public employee, not only you have stability of employment, not only you have higher wages, but you also have 6, 7, 8, 10 times more than the usual private sector retired man. So attacking this factory of privileges frontally put 1 million people in each capital of Brazil, or the Brazilian states. We have like 10, 12 states whose capitals have more than 1 million inhabitants. Rio de Janeiro is 10 million, São Paulo 15 million, Belo Horizonte is 3 million, Recife. So it's a continental dimension country with big cities. And then you saw 1 million people in each one of these capitals on the street asking for a social security reform on behalf of their children, of the future generations. I posed the problem. I said, listen, our lack of courage will destroy the retirement opportunities for everybody and will jeopardize our children. Either we face the problem now or the thing will derail. And then people went to the street asking for the Social Security, which was amazing. You see, even in countries like France today, they don't have political support to make the change. Sure. And in Brazil, everybody there. So the maturity of the thing is impressive. So the Congress approved the first reform. Then we attacked second largest expenditure. So not only the government was spending too much, 45% of GDP, but it was a low quality expenditures. Privileges in Social Security, one. Second one, interest payments on debt. One Marshall Plan a year, $106 billion to service debt a year, on internal debt. So it's the present value of a Marshall Plan. So Brazil rebuilds 1 Europe every year without escaping from poverty, which is mind-boggling. So it's a rich, wealthy country that can serve a debt like that and cannot remove. And when you compare the numbers, the first Bolsa Família, the voucher to poor people in Brazil, was 10 billion reais. We spent 40 times this, 400 billion reais, in the service of the debt. So it's shocking. So what did we do? Let's deleverage the public banks. Let's pay back the debt. Let's reduce or decelerate sharply the growth of indebtedness. Let's grab and control public expenditure, because if we do that, we change the mix. The mix was always easy on fiscal and tight on money with explosive interest rates. So we switched. Now it's tight on fiscal and easier money. Just from 1 year, last year, to this year, we reduced 100 billion reais the service of the debt. So it's 25% reduction in interest payments. So we attacked the Social Security, number one. We attacked the interest payments with good economic policy, number two. And now we attack the wage bill itself. In a country that grows 2, 3%, 2.5% this year, and has inflation of 4%, revenues grow 4 plus 2.5 compounded 7%, almost 8%. In 2 years, it's little less than 20% revenues going. So if you freeze wage bills for 1.5 years, for 2 years, vanish. Situation is controlled. So, and we are not doing that in the federal government. We are decentralized. We create the state of fiscal emergency. A mayor, a governor, or the president, whoever is in trouble, in fiscal trouble, has the power to freeze wages. It's the Brazilian version of the shutdown. In the US, the shutdown is stop paying everything. We don't stop paying. We just don't give rises. You just don't give You can't raise wages for 1 year and a half, 2 years. If you do that, revenues go up and you solve the problem with good economic policy again. So these are the three main
major
expenditures control measures. Then we go to the other side. You talked about vaca muerta. We want the oil from pre-salt and natural gas from pre-salt. We have the cleanest energy matrix in the world. It's Brazilian.
Yeah.
Because of the hydroelectric power.
Absolutely.
And we could since we discovered a new frontier of oil, we need natural gas because it's halfway between the dirty of the oil and the clean, which is the hydroelectric. So we'll be using that. We broke 2 monopolies in exploration and distribution of gas. We think we'll reduce 40% the cost of energy in Brazil. We shall try to connect to Vaca Muerta. We're bringing natural gas from Bolivia and oil, and we'll get it from the pre-salt. So with this, we could reindustrialize the country. We also promoted the law of economic freedom, because in the U.S., everything is permitted, is allowed, except what's forbidden. In Brazil, everything is forbidden, except what is allowed. So that's the way corruption spreads. Yeah. The highest the degree of control of the government over the resource, the highest the corruption. Power corrupts, absolute powers corrupts absolutely. So this thing of decentralizing resources, financial resource and political power is in the agenda. As respect to the inequality and the youth, our social security reform presented there was all about the youth, all about the young guys. So we want to transit to a new world, eliminating totally the most cruel tax in the world, which is taxing labor. So the kid just getting out of school, 100% taxes on wages. So it's a low wage for whoever receives and very expensive for the company because there's no experience. So we want to remove taxes entirely for the youth so that they would have good jobs, good employments immediately as soon as they get out of school, and they would have a capitalization system for the future through the Social Security. Unfortunately, it did not pass. It had fiscal potence, but it could not transform the system. And finally, to the young people and also income inequality, we know that countries that have education, even without natural resources, Japan does not have our oil, does not have our beautiful agricultural land. They have only Japanese, and every time one is born, the other falls in water because it's a tiny country. But they have technology, they have education. South Korea, education. So we need to invest in education. And the earliest, the better. So we'll be supporting a massive first early stage resources, voucher, to help to educate kids the early stages. So because most of the income inequality in Brazil come from 2 sources. First, the inequality of educational opportunities. So the poor kids don't have jobs, they don't have education, don't speak English, don't have, it's a very sad thing, and very high taxes on labor. And this tax on labor make that 40 million Brazilians do not contribute. They don't have jobs, they cannot contribute to the Social Security either. So you destroy jobs and you destroy the financial foundations of the Social Security system. We addressed that too. And the income inequality, one source, like I said, is the inequality of opportunity, especially through education, but also the privileges, that the lack of competition, because we should ask ourselves how 3.7 billion Eurasians are being removed from poverty. Never in the history of humankind so many people escaped from poverty, like India, China, Vietnam. They're escaping from poverty using the very same tools that we are not using: markets, competition. You go to Brazil, 200 million people have to buy construction services from 6 companies. Have to have banking service from 6 banks. So cartel here, cartel there, cartel everywhere, exploiting 200 million, because we don't like capitalism. We hate competition.
Behind, we lost this big wave of innovation and globalization. And I use the word mind-factoring, from labor with our hands to labor with our minds. This change will take a while, but we are running after it. The future of manufacturing will be mind-factoring. Industry has been a capital center, based on capital. We thought of educating people so that they could get a job. The big change is now industry will be human-centered. And we'll have to adapt the machines, and not people anymore to get the job, but they adapt the machines to get the job done. So I think this will be the great change to value human talent, creativity, even though working will be reduced to the machines themselves through IoT and artificial intelligence. So we now have to qualify capital to participate in our production system instead of just qualifying people to get a job in the system. In a country like Brazil, we are a little behind, not to say a lot behind. So we have a first level of concerns, which is removing a hostile environment to business in general, to receive and redeploy all this knowledge that is available already all over the world. It's a general equilibrium problem. So the worst enemy of the environment is poverty. People destroy environment because they need to eat. They have other concerns, which are not the concerns of the people who already destroyed their forests, they already fought their ethnic minorities and all these things. So it's a very complex problem. It is no simple solution. But this first level is try to remove all these obstacles, is something we are doing down there. But the second level, I would say, the most important thing to get this wave of the future is, the key word would be connectivity. It's exactly what is going on here now. We are establishing right now, as we speak, at least 3 new centers in Brazil. One is an affiliate center to the World Economic Forum, exactly to promote. We created in Brazil already the forum with the industrialists, because we must put together the industrialists, academia, research, and education, and business people, because business people know how you have to generate sustainable businesses, businesses that incorporate the values of society. So all of us want a greener space. All of us need more food. So depending on the chemicals you use to get more food, you don't have the cleaner space. And this is a political solution. It is not simple. It's very complex. There is a balance between reason and how to communicate and emotions. So what we are doing is exactly to creating an environment, trying to create an environment in Brazil. The first center is this affiliate center with the World Forum, exactly to explore the idea of mind-factoring, how we get there. The second idea is, is integrating the committee. We're talking to Professor Schwab. There's a skills accelerator committee. They are putting to measure how things are going all over the world and get inputs from everybody to distribute later these initiatives. A decentralized process of innovation. This is the big challenge. And for the latecomer, like Brazil, it's even more crucial. So I would say our main role as a government is not to innovate, is to make sure that we have a business environment, an academic environment that allows us to appropriate all this knowledge. Remember, Brazilians invented the airplane. The Americans say it was the Wright brothers, but we have Santos Dumont. We invent the airplanes. So we did some interesting things in the past. And we are the second largest democracy in the world. So the voting power there is very important. So people want to have the industries and the jobs. And at the same time, there is an enormous pressure to keep it green. So it's a delicate balance, but we are pretty sure we'll accomplish it.
Hi, I'm Pawan Goenka from India. In emerging economies like India, the government always worries that will advance manufacturing take away jobs. And while industry keeps trying to say, no, but different jobs will come, nobody's able to explain what those different jobs would be for countries like India, not for US or Europe. Any views?
Let's start with that one. Minister, do you want to take that? What are the new jobs that are coming?
Well, I think when the first revolution came, everybody was very much concerned, and we created a lot of new jobs of higher order. And linking with what was said before, it's all about creating meaningful lives, better lives. All of us as a human species, we escape from nature. We are the animal who escaped from nature. And then we use technology. First, at random, destroying nature here and there, but more and more, and that's the great view of the dynamics of an open society with democracies and markets, that the values we have as human beings penetrate the production system. So at the beginning is blind forces producing. It should be a very stupid life if you were just a guy in the Adam Smith time just pressing one screw here, one screw there. And like she said, young guys today and kids, they are thinking, they have dreams of meaningful lives. They just don't want to get in a dark room and work hard and have smoke on their eyes and their lungs. So we are changing and becoming more humans in the sense of having better lives. So I think this is exactly what will happen. We have an additional problem in India, Brazil, because we were left behind. And the great chance now is exactly because it's a new revolution. And when a new revolution, new tools are available, you can catch up. You can even ride ahead. Brazil is the fourth largest, and China and India the third largest digital market in the world. So innovations in Israel will be tried in Brazil because they have technology, but they don't have scale. We have scale. So innovations in Silicon Valley are being tested in Brazil also. So I think these new jobs will show up, but more than that, services and more and more the value will be at the services layer. So we can catch up if we have training, education, but especially if we are connected.